Hi guys, my name's Dale and welcome to D&DGaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest, in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up-and-coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is God's Trigger. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. God's Trigger is a top-down Twitch shooter developed by One More Level and published by Techland Publishing. The game released in 2018 for Windows PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. You play as two interchangeable characters, an angel and a demon, as you slice, stab, shoot and blast your way through various level environments to get to heaven and ultimately stop the apocalypse. So Dale, what are your first impressions?
My first thoughts were that it was a Hotline Miami style top-down game, but with slightly more modern graphics rather than that pixelated style that had. As soon as I booted it up though, I noticed the dev team and publisher were the same as Ghost Runner, which we recently reviewed, and so I was intrigued to see if this was going to be as frustratingly difficult as Ghost Runner could be at times. Luckily, I didn't find this quite as challenging.
Yeah, so my first impression from screenshots and trailer footage was a top-down shooter fighting game with very graphic violence, I guess. One of those Twitch shooter games where you die a hell of a lot. So what were your general thoughts following the playthrough?
Overall, I mostly enjoyed this one. The story was just okay, but I did like the fact that it had a bit of a challenge to the game with this kind of one-hit death mechanic. That type of mechanic can also be very frustrating, particularly in the boss fights, and so it's the kind of game for me that you can go from really enjoying it 1 minute to then rage quitting the next before calming down and coming back to it later on. It wasn't perfect, but I did stick with it to the end, and even after completing the final mission, I then went back to the main missions just to redo them, try and get a better score and collect all the magazines.
Yeah, so for me, when I started the game, it did take me a while to get into it, and at first I wasn't really enjoying it, but gradually I found it started to grow on me, and after a few missions I was really enjoying it, especially with the magazines. I felt it took me a while to get into, mainly down to the Twitch style controls and the difficulty, which we'll go into more about shortly.
So in terms of graphic options, there's really not much in this, just some basic options such as texture quality and shadows quality, etc.
Yeah, so very few graphic options in this, and kind of be expected for a game of its type, so no surprise there, I suppose. What did you think in terms of the graphics and graphics performance?
Well, I ran with everything on the highest settings and it ran perfectly well for me. The graphic style itself is relatively basic, but I quite liked it and it was perfectly fine for a top-down shooter game like this.
Yeah, so we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran well for me as well. Everything on the highest graphic settings, and there were no notable graphics issues or frame drops for me. The graphics themselves are kind of cartoony and it's a bit reminiscent of Borderlands or Call of Juarez, but in a top-down view, which I did quite like. The environments are quite varied and the colours and the lighting are quite vibrant as well.
In terms of the player controls, I just used the mouse and keyboard as usual, and the controls in this were about as expected. It takes a bit getting used to how the crosshair moves, I found, because your aiming direction is independent of WASD, which controls just the actual player movement. It can sometimes mean that you want to hit an enemy, but the crosshair is actually facing the wrong way because of where you got your mouse on the screen, so you might not actually hit them. And it's just one of those mechanics that takes a little getting used to and just something to be aware of.
Yeah, so the player controls are pretty simple and fairly typical for this type of game. You know, WASD, move character around, and as Dale's pointed out, mouse to control the aiming direction, which, yeah, I think it was that took me quite a while to get used to, really, with the game. Left and right mouse clicks perform different types of attack. Left mouse click performs the character's main weapon attack. The right click performs a secondary weapon attack and varies based on the weapon held at the time. The left shift button performs a character's special move and requires a full charge meter to perform. You can switch characters with the Q key, and you can perform a stealth kill by using the R key when behind an enemy. Buttons 1 to 5 to cycle through special moves unlocked with progress in the game. So in terms of the game's story and mechanics, there's not much to the story. Simply put, it's a angel and demon teaming up to try and kill their way into heaven to stop the apocalypse. That's about it, really. Not particularly interesting. So in terms of mechanics, you play as two characters, an angel and a demon, and you can switch between the two. The game is set across multiple missions within 5 chapters. The aim is to work your way through the missions, wiping out enemies in a fast-paced, over-the-top, violently graphic way. You gain XP by killing enemies, creating combos and smashing up items in the environment. At the end of each mission, you see the number of deaths and amount of EXP for each character is calculated, and this goes towards unlocking new skills, abilities and upgrades. You also get an overall grade from A to E based on level completion time and deaths. At the final part of each chapter, there's a boss fight.
In terms of other game modes, it's really just a co-op mode, which is worth noting that this is a local co-op, not an online multiplayer type co-op, so it's quite limited in that sense. In terms of the UI, well, this quite minimal and simple in this one. It had just the basics, which was perfectly sufficient and did the job really.
Yeah, it was a minimal UI, but I thought it suited the game quite well, considering the field of view in top-down is limited. It's simply a special move charge meter to the bottom left of the screen with a button reminder and text highlighting a combo move. An icon over the top of the charge meter highlights the special move that's selected. So what did you think about the sound and music?
Well, the music was decent enough in this. It has a mostly heavy rock style, but I did notice it gets a little repetitive. After just a few levels, I seem to notice it just basically repeating over and over again, especially in the menus. I found the voice acting was really very average in this, nothing outstanding, but certainly nothing terrible.
If I were to get my payback, first I had to stop the Four Horsemen. Luckily, an unexpected help was on its way to lead me straight to them. I had to take down the Horsemen, one at a time.
Likewise, with the weapon sounds, they were just okay, fairly standard, nothing spectacular.
Yeah, I found the same really, nothing to add to any of that. The music was pretty good, but yeah, it did get quite repetitive quite quickly. So in terms of bugs and glitches, I didn't notice any bugs and glitches and it ran really well for me.
Yeah, I did notice a couple of bugs and glitches actually. So I did find that once I completed the game, I went back to replay a level to find the magazine and get a better score on it. And it started out with a completely black screen with just the character appearing on the bottom left after a while on the UI, but literally just a completely blank screen. I did get a clip of that, which we'll put up now, but yeah, I couldn't do anything and I just had to exit and restart the whole level again. I also encountered a bug early on. There was a level where there was a sequence where a door was supposed to open after killing some enemies. First time it opened fine, but then I died just past that section, so I had to do it again because I hadn't reached the checkpoint. Second time I did it, and several times after that, it just didn't trigger properly. I killed all the enemies and the door just stayed closed. And I tried several things to get around it, but didn't work at all, so I had to just restart the level entirely. Luckily, the bug was on the very first section of that level, so it wasn't too much of an issue, but yeah, kind of a strange one there. Okay, to sum up, things I liked about the game. I do like these types of top-down shooters, and I did mostly enjoy my playthrough on this one. It was relatively average, as I mentioned earlier, but yeah, I even went back after finishing the final mission, so it did have a good amount of replayability. That replayability mostly comes in the fact that most of the main campaign missions you can go back and do again, try and get a better score, maybe collect the secrets which come in the form of the magazines. I arguably enjoyed that more though than the boss fights. So when I'd actually finished the game, going back, just redoing those kind of missions casually just to pick up the secrets was kind of more fun than my first playthrough. I like the range of upgrades that you get at the end of each level. It kept it interesting and meant it scaled well with the later levels when they became longer and with more challenging enemies, as you were going into them with much better upgrades to your abilities and even extra abilities.
Yeah, so in terms of things I liked about it, it's just a fun game, doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a lot of replayability to the game to improve on mission ratings and scores, etc. There's a nice range of weapons and special abilities and quite an extensive range of upgrades to the abilities, such as increasing the range or duration of the ability to get bonus XP or reduced cost. A good range of environments and puzzles, and the way you interact with the environment is well implemented. You do really have to think as you play this one. It's not necessarily just a run in, blast everything type of game. Sometimes you have to really plan your entry to an area to use a particular character in order to take out the enemies without getting killed yourself, and this can take quite a few attempts to get right.
In terms of things I didn't like, well, I noticed that on some of the levels, the bullets seem to go straight through the wall and catch you when fired by the enemies, especially the shotguns, because they have such a wide burst to them. But then this wouldn't always happen when firing back at the enemies. So when you've got the shotgun, you couldn't kind of just fire through walls. And I just noticed some, I don't know if it was just the kind of hit points on the character. Yeah, just something I noticed that was kind of annoying at times. Touching on the triggers and the hit points, I did notice that on some items, for example, when you're opening the weapon boxes, they had a very vague hitbox, which means you have to sometimes stand in quite a specific spot to actually trigger it to get it to work. And the same went for like certain handles that you were using throughout the game to open doors. And yeah, you couldn't just catch it from the side, you had to really stand in the right place. I really didn't enjoy having to go through some of the boss fights. Most of them were okay after maybe a few tries, but the final boss was tough. I really had to mentally prepare myself, and ended up like coming back to it the next day to actually complete it. It was mostly satisfying after completing the final boss, but the issue I find with some of these types of games is that kind of satisfaction isn't really enough to justify the difficulty and the stress that you have trying to get through it. Then again, it could just be that I'm shit. I think the game gave me a nervous twitch in the end, was the reaction times are literally milliseconds sometimes, where the enemy will shoot at you. You really have no time to react.
Yeah, so in terms of things I didn't like about this, you'll die a lot in this game. It's quite a difficult game generally, as these type of games typically are. Boss fights are particularly difficult, especially towards the end, and can really induce a rage quit if you're not careful. It's the sort of game that's hard to master, largely due to its one-shot death and twitchy controls. To get through a level without dying at all would take quite a few attempts at the level. The story was a bit naff. It was not particularly gripping or deep in any way, but I guess that was kind of expected for a game of this type. So in terms of scores, Dale, what do you think?
I do like these types of top-down shooters, and Hotline Miami for me is up there with the best of them. This was just more of a kind of average game, to be honest. You know, it did play well for the most part. I did mostly enjoy it, but it could also be frustrating, especially the boss levels. So overall, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, so I actually really enjoyed the game, but it did take quite a bit of time to really get into it for me, mainly due to its controls. I think it's one of those that if you don't take it too seriously, it'll be quite a fun game. And it's one that I have a few minor gripes about, such as difficulty and repetitiveness, but all in all, it was just a violently fun, really replayable game. So it's an 8 out of 10 from me.
Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.